Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the CELADON Pharmaceuticals plc investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so, and these will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. Before we begin, if I may, I would like to submit the following poll, and if you could give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. And I'll now like to hand you over to CEO James Short. Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon, and thank you for the intro. Thank you to everybody for joining today. I'm going to take you through a short presentation that we put together. Some of you are very familiar with CELADON and some of you aren't, so I'd like to say apologies for some of the reiterations that we'll do throughout the slide. I'm joined today with Jonathan Turner, our CFO. For those of you that don't know myself, I'm James Short, the CEO and co-founder of CELADON Pharmaceuticals. On the slide there, we've got 4 key deliverables that we said to the market when we IPO'd back in March last year, of which I would like to focus on a little bit more in depth on the following slides. So the first one was around the licensing. For any business like ourselves to operate in the UK, our 2 main regulators are the Home Office and the MHRA. We achieved the Home Office license some 3 years ago, which allowed us to grow and cultivate the product, which then fed into us working towards getting our GMP, which stands for Good Manufacturing Practice. We were successful with our audit with the MHRA at the back end of last year, and in January we were fortunate to get the approvals that were necessary. We then went back to the Home Office and asked them to lift the condition that they'd put on us, which subsequently they have now done that, which then allows us now to produce the product and sell that into the marketplace. One of the other conditions, one of the other drivers that we said to the market was, whilst we'd already built our phase 1 out, and that's the phase that we've been using to do these 7 harvests that we've done to get the approval, we also raised the capital and said to the market it's to build out our phase 2 capacity. With regards to our phase 1, whilst we're waiting for regulators, we actually did a planned maintenance shutdown. We have now finished that work. Phase 1 is now live, and it's through phase 1 that we will be producing that product to supply into the recent contract that I'll talk about on another slide. With regards to phase 2, just to recap, that phase, once fully operational, will be able to produce enough product, which is round about just short of 30 million of revenue. What we have decided as a business, though, is to break phase 2 down into separate phases, so we're not fetching the whole area on live. The idea behind that is we're going to switch it on within accordance to contracts that we will be bringing online. So in other words, phase 2, the first one is phase 2.1. That will come online within this year, which will produce about £3 million worth of revenue. Our next deliverable was, which sounds obvious, was to get to revenue. We recently announced that we've just signed a contract which gives us a minimum of £3 million of revenue over the next 3 years. The same company, we have also signed an LOI with them for £7 million of potential revenue that will come out of our phase 2. Now, this wasn't success overnight. This particular company we've been working with since mid-COVID, and a number of other companies we've been working with. But unfortunately, we've not been able to sign any contracts with them because we wanted to manage their expectations. In other words, it was very difficult for us to sign a supply agreement until we had the necessary regulations in place. Now we've got that, Home Office and MHRA, it now allows us to start delivering to that demand. And when I say demand, since we announced our GMP in January, the amount of inbound potential inquiries we've had has been very good. This is on top of the relationships that we've been talking to over the last 2 years. We brought a business development person on board. He joined the business in January to help us arbitrage those contracts. The next deliverable was the LVL program. Just to recap, we are the major shareholder in LVL. We bought that some 2 years ago. It's the only conditionally approved MHRA trial currently in the UK. There were 3 conditions, of which 2 of them we've satisfied. The third condition was we had to get ethics committee approval. We were close to getting that beginning of last year, but at the 11th hour, ethics committee asked us, would we be prepared to do a feasibility study first? We agreed to do that, and what that meant was we had to run a study over a 3-month period for up to, say, 100 patients. At the time, we agreed it. However, it has been very frustrating, because what it meant, which we weren't aware of at the time when agreeing it, we had to go away and get what's called CQC for the clinic, because it was outside of the trial protocol, because it's a feasibility study. Anyway, we did that. That delayed us by about 6 months, but fortunately, we managed to go live with that program last year. So we've now submitted the findings to ethics committee. There was an RNS that we sent out in December. We've been working with ethics since, and we're hopefully we'll be at the committee meeting in July. Subject to that going well, we will then be able to start our trial after that. A few good things that's come out of doing the observation study. We've managed to get the patient journey a lot better than what it was, and more to the point, which is why I decided to found the founder of this company. More to the point, we have had some incredible feedback from patients. There's a few testimonials on the screen. There's some of the press have picked up on it. Not only has it helped the pain, but it's also helped their quality of life, i.e., most of them were on 15 to 30 tablets a day. That's reduced down to some patients not having any tablets, and some just being on 3 or 4 tablets a day. And typically those tablets are opioids. So for me, it's great to see that, it's reduction in dependency on other medication. And the other one is, the feedback we've been getting is they've been having a good night's sleep, which in turn gives them that better quality of life. So, the purpose of the LVL trial is to collect the data. It's to then hopefully it'll be a CELADON product that will be feeding into pushing the trial forward. On that note, I will hand you over to Jonathan, and he'll quickly take you through the year-end numbers.
That's great. Thank you, Jim. So obviously the numbers we are about to talk through are the numbers for the year ended 31st of December 2022. As Jim's mentioned, it wasn't until January this year that we obtained the MHRA approval for our API, and in March 2023 when we got permission from the Home Office to be able to sell the API to our potential customers. So the numbers that we've got on screen reflect the pre-registration status, and so there's obviously in the revenue number of £24,000. That is purely from the LVL study and doesn't reflect the sale of the API to either the sort of R&D markets or to the wider patient community. As Jim said, during the course of 2022, we had 7 harvests of a product. The cost associated with that, with those harvests, is included in the operating loss of £5.4 million. Clearly, there's a fairly significant gap between the operating loss of £5.4 million and the loss before tax of £18.1 million. That difference is largely down to the accounting adjustments related to the reverse takeover that was undertaken during the course of March 2022. A lot of those numbers will have been seen in the interim results that were announced back in September. There is one further difference that's come through in the second half of the year, which is, as Jim said, in relation to the CQC costs in connection with the LVL study and the slightly lower patient take-up than we had anticipated. Slower take-up than we had anticipated. That meant that we have a non-cash accounting charge in respect of the LVL acquisition. At 31st of December, we had £5.1 million worth of cash, and you may have seen from the RNS that was issued this morning, at the end of May, we had £1.8 million worth of cash. In addition to that, we have about £1 million worth of receivables due from HMRC. We've got a £500,000 VAT refund due this week, and we successfully submitted an R&D tax credit claim at the end of last year that got paid in January. We're about to submit our claim for the year ended December 2022. We expect another over £400,000 to come in the next month or so. Finally, the last point to make is, as you may have seen from the recent RNS, we have entered into a new revolving credit facility that gives us £7 million worth of liquidity and cash that will allow us to fund the sort of phased build out of phase 2 of the facility, so we can meet the demand associated with the contracts that we've been in discussion with over the last few months. With that, I'll pass it back to Jim.
Thank you, John. So as you can see on the slide there, we've achieved an awful lot since we founded the business back in 2018. And this is a credit to the incredible team that we've managed to build, throughout this journey. But from when we founded the business, the goal was always to get to revenue and to create IP. And the end box there shows you, what we're working towards. We've managed to demonstrate that. We've managed to, hit the targets that we've set ourselves and that we've set to the market. The key driver now is to keep that revenue going, and on the back of that, create the IP. And what I mean by IP is, as you've seen from the LVL, we are creating IP there. You'll see the box there in the middle, Kingdom Therapeutics. That's an autism trial that we own 20% of. They've had great success up to now. The idea is, if that is successful, it will be our product that feeds into that. We've also been working with another company to do a Crohn's disease. On the back of that, for the last 2, maybe 3 years, we've also our scientists have been working in our lab to perfect some other IP that we can create some patents around. You will see towards the end of this year, we will be making an announcement on a particular disease that we've also been working on. At latest, it'll be Q1 next year. So the idea there is that, yes, we would like to go through that full clinical trial program, but because we are operating in the specialist framework, it allows us to produce the product and enter the market a lot quicker, which ultimately over the next 5 to 10 years, that we'll hopefully have approved products as well, which we can then get reimbursement for. So the business model is, medium to short-term revenue. I say that 1 to 5 years as what they call being an wholesaler, but long-term, it's that drug development and supplying product into that moving forward. So just to sum up, we've expanded successfully in our existing facility. Phase 1's back online. Phase 2 is now coming further deeper online within accordance to the contracts we're getting, i.e. the sales. We've managed to attract sales now, not just UK, but also Europe. And we successfully tested that shipment as well. LVL, a little bit disappointed that's a little bit later, but that's the challenge we had working with regulators. But we're very confident that we'll get over that hurdle within the coming months. And the next one is the confidence that we've had from external investors that are willing to give us a facility. We also have a number of other investors that we've been talking to that also want to look at further facilities. Some are equity and some are debt. So for me, that shows you that there is a lot of confidence still out there, even in this current climate, that there are investors there that are still interested in our story. On that note, I will hand over to any questions.
James, Jonathan, that's great. And thank you very much indeed for your presentation this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab that's situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the team take a few moments to review those questions that were submitted already, I would like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. Jonathan, James, as you can see in the Q&A tab there, we have received a number of questions throughout your presentation this afternoon. And thank you to all of those on the call for taking the time to submit their questions. But guys, if I may just hand back to you to respond to those questions where it's appropriate to do so, and then I'll pick up from you at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, so the first one's Tom, which is a great question. Plans for international expansion. Don't get me wrong, Tom, we get approached by a number of companies, from as far as the US, from Malaysia, little bit in Thailand. What we have to be careful of is, Tom, that we don't try and run before we can walk. I've been building businesses for 30 years and I like to try and keep as focused as we possibly can. We've got a phenomenal opportunity in the UK alone. If we look at the statistics there that the government have released, there's 3 million people with chronic pain that are eligible for a cannabinoid. So if you look at our existing facility, whilst it's quite a large facility, we can only produce enough product for 50,000 patients. That's 100 million revenue. So, the opportunity in the UK alone is incredible. But don't get me wrong, we are looking at other territories for partnership. We've got one in one particular country now that wants us to partner with them because of our experience. And we are talking to them seriously where they're offering us equity and cash to help them through that journey. So I hope that answers that question, Tom. The other one from Mark regarding R&D spend. Interestingly, Mark, and we were asked this question from an investor earlier today, and if we look at the R&D that we've done today over the last 2 years, we have had to build a lab and build a team just to get us through this process to get our licensing. So what we've been doing is using that team whilst, rather than having them sat around, we've been using that team to help progress that R&D, and our chief scientist officer has been in this game for 20 odd years. So we've been doing that in the background. So there's not been a real heavy cost to that. However, moving forward, it's about balancing it. We're not an R&D company, albeit we are doing an awful lot in the background. There's some companies that purely do R&D. We're a bit of an hybrid. We want to get to revenue and R&D. So I hope that answers that question, Mark. One from Tim. On 3 years sales, is there a take-or-pay? Yeah, so on the contract, Tim, that is a minimum. It is a take-or-pay. We have actually, in that particular contract, we've committed to doing 3 different strains for that client. But it is a take-or-pay contract. And in actual fact, if they don't take it within a period, we can actually charge them for storing it as well. And on top of that, they give us a 6-month forecast because of the different genetics that will be taken in. Next one from Nick. I'm curious what on a scale of the IP licensing might achieve that, overcoming the build-out of phase. So again, this goes back into the IP. Our lab that we have built is built for internal batch test release. But because that's constantly not getting run, it's the same lab that we can use for our R&D. You will see, once we've submitted the patent pending, you will see on the announcement, which will feed into that question a lot more, Nick, which, that will come in due course. Phase 2 fully up and running. A good question. So, we could have it fully up and running by Q1, Q2 next year. But as I said in the presentation, what we don't want to do is just completely finish it. We want to try and finish it in phases in line with the contracts that we sign. what I don't like is nice shiny objects not earning me any money. So we are going to phase it, and don't get me wrong, if we sign enough contracts to supply to 30 million, we will just put all our efforts behind getting phase 3 finished. I'll let John answer the one from Stephen, monthly cash burn one.
Thanks, Jim. So you'll have seen during the course of last year, the monthly cash burn was around £450,000. Obviously, we've been building out the team, as Jim said, in terms of recruitment of sort of business development resource and various other things. So that spend initially will go up, but as the contract comes in and deliveries start occurring for the contracts that we're winning, that cash burn will kind of normalise back down again. So we think it's probably going to be around sort of 450,000, 400,000 for the remainder of the year. But then as the additional contracts come through, obviously that will very quickly start to come back again. Because we expensed all the costs associated with the phase 1, with the validation harvests, as and when those revenues start coming, we've actually already been incurring that cost. It's just had nothing to demonstrate for the revenue side. So initially, some of the profits will appear as super profits because of the fact that we've already been incurring those costs, but we've not had the revenue side associated with it.
Another one from Stephen. So the background to our biz dev guy, comes from pharma world. So sales in pharmaceuticals. He then went working for a large LP, a Canadian one that entered into the UK, of which the Canadian company now has left the UK. So he's got an awful lot of experience in traditional pharma sales, and also in cannabinoids as well. And interestingly, one of the diseases that we are looking to launch towards the end of this year, that's where Stuart was specifically dealing with when he was selling in Big Pharma. The next one from Tim, if I could ask you to answer that one, John, around the
of course,
the RCF.
Of course. So the RCF, it's an existing shareholder who's provided that funding. It's a less than 3% shareholder. I think they have been keen to invest in the business more widely. Obviously, we're not in the process of raising equity at this point, but they were keen to provide additional funds to the business. We have obviously made sure that we are comfortable that cash is available. We've got some proof of funds, so that we're confident that money is available should as and when we need it. Obviously, that's been reviewed by our auditors as well, and Canaccord and Nomad have seen that as well. So it's something that has been looked at and reviewed, and we're comfortable those funds will be available. It has a 2-year term associated with it and has a fixed coupon of 10%.
And just on that point, we have got a number of other existing investors that have shown an interest in further investing into us. We don't really want to be looking at an equity raise at this stage. A, we don't need it, and B, I wouldn't like to bring an equity investment in at the current share price. So yeah, we have got a number of other investors that literally can't buy enough stock in the marketplace.
Are there any further questions?
There's one from Mark regarding the potential inbound inquiries. So just on that one, Mark, we've probably got around about £60 million worth of LOIs. I don't think we'll be able to turn all those into contract, but we couldn't even supply to that. All I can say is we've got the capacity in our phase 2 to go up to 30 million. The idea now is to qualify those inbound, the LOIs. And typically what we do, Mark, we get an LOI first, broad terms of the commercials. We then go to what we call product specification. And then from that, we then feed that into the business to see if that's something that we could produce or we want to produce. Subject to that being right, we then go into contract. So there's a pharmaceutical company in Germany that we've been working with since middle of last year. We're at real advanced stages with them. We've got product specification, etc. And we think that potentially will be the next contract that we will be issuing.
James, Jonathan, if I may just jump back in there, and thank you very much indeed for being so generous with your time there and addressing all of those questions that came in from investors this afternoon. And of course, if there are any further questions that do come through, we'll make these available to you immediately after the presentation has ended, just for you to review, to then add any additional responses, of course, where it's appropriate to do so. And we'll publish all those responses out on the Investor Meet Company platform. But James, perhaps before redirecting those on the call to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, if I could please just ask you for a few closing comments to wrap up with, that'd be great.
Yeah, just, thank you very much to those of you that are existing shareholders. I'm looking forward to, working with you that aren't, and hopefully bringing you on board. But the main thing is, I hope you'll agree that we've managed to deliver today on what we've said over the last 4 years of me co-founding the business. We've got a great team that we've managed to assemble. We've worked very closely with regulators. We're delivering. We're getting to revenue. Watch this space.
James, that's great. And Jonathan as well, thank you once again for updating investors this afternoon. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This won't take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of CELADON Pharmaceuticals PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good afternoon to you all.
Thank you very much, everybody.